Are you worried about today's dire financial situation?
Put simply, I would argue the Biden economic plan is working.
The storms on Wall Street continue today after regulators seized the assets of Silicon Valley Bank, marking the largest bank failure since the 2008 financial crisis.
Do you worry you'll have enough to pay your mortgage, pay your children's college tuition, enough to retire?
I believe our banking system remains strong.
Regional banks in focus once again today as the market digests the fallout of the First Republic failure.
You have questions, we have answers. It's the Gold Standard with Ken Russo and Jennifer Horn.
Thank you for joining us on another episode of the Gold Standard Radio Show. Ken Russo and Jennifer Horn back together on what has been a wild and crazy week. But Ken, here we are to just make sure that we are protecting ourselves.
We're here to represent, Jen.
Gold, guns, and God. That's what we're doing, right?
God bless America.
That's it. God bless America. We need the blessings. That's for sure. But we have a lot to talk about today in what you have titled, and I think this is like Captain Obvious here. You know, we sometimes call you sarcastic, Ken, but I think today we call you Captain Obvious because you said, Jen, the U.S. government has a debt issue.
Yeah.
And I said, you know what, Ken, you're right about that. And then we all went home. I mean, it was that easy. We all just agreed. But a lot to talk about this week.
The cracks are showing.
The cracks are definitely showing. Notice we said the cracks are definitely
People
showing.
may say, well, what do you mean? I mean, the stock market's near a high. Well, not really, because the Dow was like at 40,000. Now it's back at 38,000. But does the stock market really give a gauge of really what's going on out there?
Well, I think it's hard to know because you hear these news stories about things being so great, but yet we all know what we feel. We all know what we're experiencing with our cost of living and with the price of goods and services. People say, oh, well, everybody's working. Yeah, some people are having to work 2 jobs now. I mean, things are going in a very interesting direction, yet the people in charge like to tell us that everything is just fine. I like to call it gaslighting.
Well, you can work 3 or 4 jobs. That's why the jobs numbers are kind of skewed a little bit.
Yeah.
Because they've created all these new jobs, but it's the same person, and he's got 3 or 4 jobs.
We're going to talk about how to protect yourself today, even when there is so much chaos and craziness all around us. But before we get started, every week, it's sort of our tradition, and I thought of you because I was out this past weekend hosting an event for Jesse Waters from Fox News. He's got a new book out called Get It Together, which is good advice for all of us. And he was at the Nixon Library, and I said, you know, we talk about Richard Nixon. He joins us every week on the program. I felt like I was home.
I met her on a Monday and my heart stood still. The do run. The do run.
Wow, I did not know that President Nixon was such a great singer. That's amazing.
I'm going to suspend the convertibility of the dollar into gold.
A do run, a do run.
I've given those instructions, and that's the way it's going to be.
And that's what happened.
Yes, and that's what happened. I mean, that's why we're the world of funny money today. And, you know, people could relate, Jen. Back in the 70s, you could be a carpenter or a bricklayer or a plumber, or, you know, you could have a home. Your wife could be a stay-at-home mother, stay-at-home wife, didn't have to work. You could have 2 kids, put them through college. And you could all do this on a regular salary. Now, today, since 1971, when our dollar started, you know, to lose significant purchasing power consistently because of all the money printing, and then the government started, you know, spending money that we didn't really have at a rapid rate. And that's kind of where we are today. And how long could they keep stuff just kind of kicking the can down the road? And how long could we keep the system together? And I would tell you, Jen, it feels to me like they're desperately hanging on.
Oh, yeah.
Desperately. And the answer is, well, we can print more money. Oh, great.
And also just kind of jumping off the news cycle this week, and you've said this, and I think you're right about this. Will our financial system find even more cracks if President Trump is elected president? They would like to use anything they can to take him down. So let's talk about the cracks that are showing.
Yeah, inevitably, these cracks are going to become very, very big. And that's what we're going to talk about today. But the reason we're talking about it is because there is a way to protect yourself from being financially ruined as these cracks get wider and wider.
And that's the good news, right? The personal freedom that gold and precious metals brings. And we're going to talk about that today. So when we say, or when you say that the cracks in the economy are showing, you mentioned, the stock market looks good. We talk about gaslighting, but what does that really mean? What cracks are we starting to see?
Well, some steam is coming out of the stock market, and we don't give financial advice, but I mean, I own stocks. I follow the markets. I've been doing it for almost 30 years, and it looks to me like some of the names that are leading this market are starting to come down a bit. So we'll see. We're also entering a period where, the summer, go away in May. Usually is this the thing with the stock market. So we'll see. We're entering the summer doldrums, but the markets have been on a big run. There's been a few names that have kind of carried the market. And like I said, my contention is that the stock market is not a good indicator of what everyday people are feeling. Bonds, I read an article last week, government bonds, the safest investment in the world, right? How many times have we heard that? Are down 45% since April of 2020.
Wow.
Because interest rates went up, the value of the bonds go down. Now, if you're just holding the bonds to maturity, I guess, all right, well, you're getting killed by inflation. But when entities like banks have to realize the losses on these bonds, that's when we have bank closures, and that's when there's trouble. Also, the debt situation of the U.S., yes, it's a problem. Debt to GDP right now is approaching that 130% level. And according to history, that's a problem because that's kind of a line in the sand. Once we start getting above that level, we either have a currency crisis or we have a market bond crisis. Either way, it leads to higher inflation. And what's going on right now, Jen? Hamburger meals are $20. I read that a special market here in town sells 8 ice cubes for $29.
What?
Yeah.
8 ice cubes?
Yeah, they're round and fancy,
business.
though. Yeah. But the thing, what it is things are starting to spiral out of control. Things are starting to get outrageous in many, many aspects, and they're not going to go back down. The prices are not going to go back down. Even when they say inflation is conquered and over, the prices are not going to go back to where they were 10 years ago. So, and what's the answer? Oh, well, we can just print more money and we can take on more debt. Oh, great. So I don't see that as being a solution at all. And the question is how much could this get out of control before things really just either collapse or it's a dire, desperate situation for most people. So
and you want to make sure that you're protected. And gold and precious metals held at home, something tangible, it does that. It's been the ultimate hedge against inflation for a long time. But it is really interesting. A lot of times you're hearing politicians and the talking heads talk about corporate greed, about all of this driving the cost of things. And someone mentioned today, I think it might have been Fox Business, that the price of most McDonald's menu items are up 40% since 2019.
Right.
40%.
Right. Well, we've mentioned that that's a good barometer of what our currency loses, right?
Yep.
So I'm not surprised, and they're going to continue to try to manipulate numbers. And this is stuff that we've seen this week. What I'm very also concerned about is, the government and how they're handling our energy policies for sure.
Let's jump into that. What do you mean by that?
Well, the Energy Department this week said that it's going to sell the entire 1 million barrel Northeast gasoline supply reserve, 42 million gallons of gas. So are these just political moves, Jen, to kind of make the inflation numbers look better? They're skewed.
Yeah, it's an election year. Of course it's going to be skewed.
That kind of goes back to, like I was saying, that it's almost as if it's a desperate situation right now where it's like, what else could we do to kind of make some maneuvers to make things seem that they're not really spiraling out of control, because we all know that they are.
Right.
And how long could we kind of stay behind the curtain and pull these levers until we're exposed? That kind of seems to be, what the situation is. There's just a zillion more reasons to print money, and the government manipulating numbers is just, it's not going to change that. I mean, we're going to need more money for banks, climate change, weapons, Social Security, government employees, public assistance programs. I mean, where's all that money coming from?
It's a great question. From the printer, right? I mean, they're just making it up as they go along.
Well, they don't collect enough taxes to endorse all of those spending programs, so the rest of it has to come through deficit spending and through more debt, right?
Yeah.
And then more decades of more debt and more piled on, more money that we don't have. I mean, I just don't see where we're headed, except the cracks will get bigger. The cracks that we're starting to see, whether it is due to debt or due to printing or due to greed, or maybe it's just good versus evil. I don't know, but I would say to somebody, gold represents good, and central bank policy, monetary policy, printing money out of thin air, Wall Street type economy, especially since the 80s where our country stopped making and producing real things. That's evil.
It is, because it's fake.
It is.
Real is good, fake is bad.
The problem is that the results are going to be very real to a lot of people. You know, if you're worth 50 or $100 million,
as we are.
I mean, you know, if you're in that top 1% and you get, you know, a little loss of wealth, you're still okay.
Yeah.
If you're ultra poor, obviously we're not, you know, I feel sympathy for the ultra poor. Obviously, that's a very hard lifestyle. It can't be, you know, enjoyable, but a lot of those people are on assistance, especially a lot of the people who are coming over the border.
They're being subsidized.
It's the people in the middle
Yep.
that make this country great, the small businesses. They're being wiped out. So are we going to have an economy eventually of just the ultra rich and the ultra poor? Is that where it goes back to, well, everyone will just, you know, own nothing and be happy and eat bugs? I mean, I don't know. I don't want to believe that.
I don't either, but you and I both live in California, and we see the microcosm that's being created in California, and that is that these policies that they're testing out here really do eke out, they push out the middle class. You don't want to see this spread out on a national level, on a global level. All of this stuff is connected. But Ken, what we like to do is tell people that you can help yourself. You can give your family a fighting chance with all of the craziness and the chaos. And we tell people that gold and silver, precious metals, are a really good way to do that. Why do you say that?
Well, it has a historical track record of being a store of value. So if you're looking for something that you could hold privately outside of the banking system, something that will hold your purchasing power, something where if the banking system or if the markets, you know, collapse, or if we're limited about if moving our money around, that could be a possibility. At least all of your assets are not tied to a dead, dying paper system. So have some tangible assets like gold and silver. And like I said, they have a long, long track record of holding your purchasing power. And I think today, Jen, they're more important than ever.
I think you're right about that. 855-322-4653. That's a number for Midas Gold Group. 855-322-GOLD. 855-322-4653. And always online, MidasGoldGroup.com. MidasGoldGroup.com. It's a Gold Standard Radio Show with Ken Russo and Jennifer Horn.
Dr. Gorka here. You're listening to The Gold Standard with your hosts, Ken Russo from veteran-owned Midas Gold Group and Jennifer Horn. Owning private money in the form of physical gold and silver is perhaps more important than ever to your long-term financial security. As U.S. banks fail, the Biden administration sends hundreds of billions abroad while depleting our strategic oil reserves. However, the biggest financial threat may be coming from within: central bank digital currency. The patents have been filed and the big banks have released plans for implementation. Midas Gold Group sees tyrannical implications: the end of cash, the end of financial privacy, big government able to see your every purchase. Could there be ties to social credit? Hear more commentary on the political and economic issues that affect your financial security right here on the Gold Standard. You can create your own Gold Standard with a call to Midas Gold Group, 855-322-GOLD. That's 855-322-4653, MidasGoldGroup.com.
Welcome back. It is the Gold Standard Radio Show. Ken Russo and Jennifer Horn back together again. I love when you come into the studio prepared, Ken. He's got visual aids today, so I cannot wait to chat with you.
I have one, and I was also told that I have to hold it up higher to the camera.
Yes, nice and straight to the camera. Well, do you want to do? Okay, let's jump right into it. No messing around.
I hope people can see it.
And by the way, if you were listening to this on the radio and you'd like to see a video version of this program, go to MidasGoldGroup.com and you'll be able to see all of the podcasts. There's a whole bunch up there. All right, so tell us what you're holding up. This looks like a map. of the United States.
This is basically that our food supply and our land is being invaded, how China is buying up farmland across America. It's kind of a map that's gone viral this week.
And it's frightening.
Well, Washington, Oregon, California, Utah, Arizona, Colorado, Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, Nebraska, Arkansas, Missouri, Louisiana. That's Iowa, Arkansas, Mississippi, Georgia, Florida, South Carolina, North Carolina. These are all states where China is buying a lot of farmland.
That's right. And let's not forget that while we're all divided and talking about politics and Trump and Biden and all of this, China is doing this quiet thing where they're slipping into our country through an open border. They're sending in military-aged young men coming in without their families by the tens of thousands. They're buying up our farmland, as you say, Ken, and with special emphasis on farmland near military bases. We have a crisis that I think many of us have no idea what the outcome could look like.
Yeah, and last week, Jen, China and Russia came out with an 8,000-page joint statement about the New World Order.
Nice.
And how they're working together, and obviously the United States is no longer their boss.
Correct.
Driving the Chinese, Jen, and the Russians into each other's arms, it could turn out to be one of the biggest strategic miscalculations of all time. Mm-hmm. I mean, realistically. So it's no secret that a lot of these other countries are doing business outside of the dollar.
Right.
It's not a secret that, the petrodollar made it a law that all oil trades needed to be settled in dollars, basically made the dollar the world reserve currency. And it's losing its grip on that world reserve currency status.
Yeah.
So, people ask me all the time, what do you think is going to happen? Well, I think the government's going to print more money. I think they're going to spend more money, and I think our dollar's going to lose a lot of value. Mm-hmm. Beyond that, you have security issues, you have privacy issues, you have control issues, you have all of that stuff. And all of these things that are going on just tell me that we need to be more careful than ever, because we're reaching a point where, this hurts me to say, it almost seems as if our great run as being the world superpower is closer to the end rather than the beginning.
And I know that you don't say that lightly, because what I know about you, Ken, is that you are a patriot and you love America and what our country was founded on. But too many people have put their own power and their own gain ahead of the interests of our great country and the fundamentals of our country.
That's a good way to put it, yeah. And that's going to affect our money, and it's going to affect our financial system, and it's going to affect our debt, and that's exactly what's going on. But you and I talked about the 7 stages of empire. Maybe we'll bring that up on the next show.
Yeah.
7 stages of empire, where we're on the last couple of stages here, where we're going to have a currency and a debt crisis and social unrest, chaos, and I think Ray Charles could see that we're entering that type of period.
Yeah.
So we have to be very careful. And I was also alarmed this week at some of the real estate, commercial real estate losses, Jen, because you and I have been talking about that these losses are inevitable. And a lot of these banks have a lot of commercial real estate. There was a building in New York, which actually in Seattle, a Pacific Place Mall.
Okay.
It was valued at $271 million in 2014, and it sold last week for $67 million.
Wow.
People don't realize when the debt behind assets goes bad, Jen, the value of the asset goes down significantly. Also, for the first time since the great financial crisis in 2008, you remember that financial crisis?
I do.
Yes, that one. It's the first time last week that we saw AAA rated bonds that were backed by commercial real estate, the investors took losses. That's the first time that we've seen that.
And we saw that in 2008 as well.
16 years ago.
Yeah.
So a lot of things, and they say, most financial contagions start in the credit markets.
Okay. What does that mean?
Well, debt.
Debt.
And what we started this show saying that the government has a debt problem. I would contend that everything is debt.
That's right.
consumers have debt. States have a lot of debt.
The feds.
Corporations have a lot of debt. The government has more debt than anyone. And the answer can't be we're going to put more debt on and we're going to spend more money that we don't have.
Pay our debt with more debt, basically.
Does that make any sense to you?
No. And you know what? In real life, that doesn't make any sense. And it wouldn't be allowed. I mean, how often can you take out a new credit card to pay down the old one? How many times is that going to work for you? I mean, maybe once or twice before it's over. It's broken.
Well, the government can't print gold.
No.
And I would tell you that it's my contention that the reason why the price of gold is going up, one of the reasons, is that a lot of these other investors, central banks, foreigners are starting to say gold is a more attractive investment than United States debt or even paper dollars or even risky markets that we don't really understand, and we know that they're in a big bubble. And I would contend that because of that increased demand, that is pushing the price up for safety, for gold, for privacy that gold represents, and also for the track record over the last few years that it's outperforming all other markets. Let me look at this other chart here real quick for you, just so you know we're not making up these numbers real quick. There's this one.
Or you have to explain that one. That's got fine print on it, Ken.
In the last 5 years, gold has outperformed the dollar by 45%. In the last 5 years, gold has outperformed 20-year plus bonds by 57%. Over the last 5 years, gold has outperformed the Dow Jones Industrial Average by 16%. I mean, those are the major assets, right? Now, there is one asset on here that has outperformed gold. It's crypto.
Really?
Yes. Now, okay, well, there's a time and place for everything.
Okay.
But I would say that crypto should not be faced against gold. I think that crypto should be looked at in some of the same light as gold, because both of them are diversification from paper money. Both of them offer a different way to settle transactions, potentially, for buying or selling. The main difference, though, is that there's one asset that you could hold on to, and the other asset, in my opinion, is connected to an electrical grid. I don't know if I really understand it. I don't know, flash drives.
Yeah,
it's tough.
You still have to rely on not being able to just grab it when you need it, right?
And most people, I've read articles that most people who invest in Bitcoin, only about 2% of them actually use it to buy and sell things with it. So most people have it because they view it as a way to make money, which is fine. But it is what it is. But the main point is the main assets of our country that have been around for 30 or 40 or 50 or 100 years. Gold is significantly outperforming those over the last few years, which it makes me believe, like I was just talking to you, that more and more people are starting to see the fraud and they're starting to see the corruption of our system.
Yeah, they want to take a step back.
And the higher price of gold is kind of an admission of that toxic financial system and our paper money. And in my opinion, people are looking for the safety, the sovereignty, the freedom, the privacy that only gold and silver can offer.
And just in our last moment here, don't let that high price of gold scare you, right? Because this is indicative of where we are right now. And gold is still a great way to protect yourself. If you're interested in finding out more and talking to someone who can take you through this process, 855-322-4653, 855-322-GOLD, 855-322-4653. I say it's kind of the insurance for your money.
That's the way you should look at it. It's not really, you don't really own gold to make a lot of money on it, although it is possible. You own it for all these other reasons. And like I said, now's the time. Now is the time. Don't wait. Take the time this week to make the phone call, 855-322-4653, 855-322-GOLD. You can also get all the resources on the website at MidasGoldGroup.com, podcasts, product catalogs, and more at MidasGoldGroup.com. And don't forget, one of the best parts, you can go see the guys over at Midas. Just call.
Yeah.
Just call.
Phoenix or Thousand Oaks, but give them a call, 855-322-GOLD. And Ken Russo, thanks so much.
Yeah, nice to be with you. Have a great week.
Nice to be with you too. 855-322-4653. Thanks for joining us. It's the Gold Standard Radio Show with Ken Russo and Jennifer Horn.